A homeless man finds shelter in a forgotten mansion, but instead of safety, he uncovers rooms filled with millions in cash, blackmail files of powerful people, and a ledger exposing a secret society called the Order of the Saffron Veil. And just when he thinks it couldn't get worse, a woman with a gun shows up to clean up the mess. This isn't just a story, it's a ticking time bomb of betrayal, power, and blood. Sit tight, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the story. The humid night wrapped around Kofi Mensah like a suffocating blanket, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and distant street food. At 32, Kofi was a ghost in Accra's bustling OSU district, his life reduced to scavenging through market bins for scraps of kenkey or half-rotten mangoes. His stomach growled, a relentless ache that gnawed at his resolve. His worn sandals slapped against the dirt paths, the soles so thin he felt every pebble. Neon signs from OSU's bars flickered in the distance, their glow taunting him with a life he'd never touch. Kofi adjusted the tattered sack slung over his shoulder, his only possessions, a cracked water bottle and a faded Kent cloth, clinking softly inside. He paused to catch his breath near a cluster of baobab trees, their gnarled branches twisting like ancient spirits guarding secrets. That's when he saw it, a rusted iron gate, nearly swallowed by overgrown vines and thorny shrubs. It stood half-hidden, as if the jungle itself wanted it forgotten. Beyond the gate loomed a decaying mansion, its silhouette jagged against the moonlit sky. The locals called it Asare's Folly, the abandoned home of Kwame Asare, a billionaire who'd vanished a decade ago. Whispers clung to the place, tales of corruption, stolen gold, even juju curses that drove Kwame away. Kofi didn't believe in curses, but hunger made him bold. Shelter, even a cursed one, was better than another night under a leaking market stall. He gripped the gate's bars, the rust flaking under his calloused fingers, and pushed. It groaned, resisting, but gave way just enough for him to slip through. The courtyard was a graveyard of neglect, cracked fountains, weeds choking stone paths, and a rusted Rolls-Royce sinking into the earth. The mansion itself was a relic of opulence, its once white facade now stained gray, with shattered windows like empty eyes. Kofi's heart thudded as he approached the heavy oak door, its carved patterns worn but regal. He pushed it open, the hinges shrieking like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with dust, catching in his throat and stinging his eyes. Moonlight poured through cracked stained-glass windows, casting eerie patterns across marble floors veined with gold. Chandeliers hung above, their crystals dangling like skeletal fingers, swaying faintly though no breeze stirred the air. Kofi's footsteps echoed as he ventured deeper, his sandals leaving faint prints in the dust. The grand hall opened into a maze of rooms, parlors with rotting velvet curtains, a dining room with a table set for a feast never eaten, and portraits of stern-faced men glaring from the walls. Their eyes seemed to follow him, judging his intrusion. "Who were you?" Kofi muttered, his voice swallowed by the silence. He found a library, its shelves sagging under moldy books, their titles faded. His fingers brushed a leather-bound volume, its spine embossed with a strange symbol, a saffron-colored veil. A faint click made him freeze. The bookshelf shuddered, then slid aside, revealing a hidden panel. Behind it, a steel safe, its surface cold and unyielding. Kofi's breath hitched. Could this be his salvation? A way out of the streets? He reached for the safe's handle, his hands trembling with hope and fear. But as his fingers grazed the metal, another click, sharper, deeper, echoed through the room. The floor beneath him quaked, dust raining from the ceiling. With a grinding roar, a trapdoor yawned open at his feet, revealing a spiral staircase plunging into darkness below. Kofi Mensah's heart pounded as the trapdoor groaned open, revealing a spiral staircase that plunged into an inky void. The air turned colder, carrying a damp, earthy scent that clung to his skin. He clutched the flickering candelabra he'd grabbed from the mansion's library, its weak flame dancing wildly, casting jagged shadows on the walls. His worn sandals hesitated at the edge, but desperation drove him forward. Whatever lay below might be his ticket out of hunger, out of the streets of Accra. He took a shaky breath, whispering to himself, "Kofi, you've faced worse than darkness." The first step creaked under his weight, the sound echoing like a warning in the narrow shaft. Each step downward felt like descending into the belly of some ancient beast, the walls slick with mildew, the air growing heavier with every turn. The staircase seemed endless, spiraling tighter until Kofi's head spun. At last, his foot hit solid ground, a cold stone floor that sent a chill through his bones. The basement stretched out before him, a labyrinth of corridors lit only by his trembling candle. The walls were rough, carved from the earth, and the air smelled of decay and secrets. He moved forward, the flame revealing doorways branching off into shadowed rooms. The first room stopped him cold. Stacks of Ghanaian sadi filled it, bundled in neat piles but rotting, their edges curling with green mold. Billions, maybe, left to crumble like forgotten dreams. Kofi's fingers brushed a stack, the paper disintegrating under his touch. "Who leaves this much money to rot?" he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might wake something. He pressed on, the next room twisting his stomach. Its walls were plastered with photographs, hundreds of them, pinned like trophies. Ghanaian politicians, their faces grim in candlelight, caught in illicit embraces. Businessmen exchanging briefcases in dark alleys. A Nollywood actress, her fame plastered across billboards, frozen in a compromising moment with a man whose face Kofi recognized, a minister from TV. Kofi's hands trembled as he touched a photo, the implications sinking in. These were blackmail files, a gallery of shame meant to control the powerful. His candle flickered, nearly dying, as he backed away, his breath shallow. "What kind of place is this?" he whispered, his voice shaking. The corridor stretched deeper, each step pulling him further into the mansion's secrets. At its end loomed a massive vault door, its steel rusted but imposing, like a guardian of forbidden truths. A rusted crowbar lay in a corner, as if left for him. Kofi's muscles strained as he wedged it into the lock, the metal screeching in protest. Sweat beaded on his forehead, the candle's wax dripping onto his hand, burning his skin. With a final heave, the vault gave way, revealing a treasure that stole his breath. Gold bars gleamed in neat stacks, their surfaces catching the candlelight like miniature suns. Velvet cases held diamonds, their facets sparkling with cold fire. And there, on a pedestal, sat a leather-bound ledger, its cover embossed with the same Saffron Veil symbol he'd seen upstairs. Kofi's hands shook as he opened it. The pages were meticulous, written in tight script. Lists of bribes to ministers, coded bank accounts in the Caymans, and transactions tied to illegal gold mines filled the first few pages. Then, a section labeled, "The Order of the Saffron Veil." Names, dates, and cryptic symbols formed a coded roster of members, Ghana's elite, woven into a secret society. Kofi's mind spun. Was Kwame Asare, the mansion's lost billionaire, one of them? Or had he been their enemy? The ledger felt heavy, dangerous, like holding a ticking bomb. He clutched it to his chest, his thoughts racing. This could change everything, his life, Accra, maybe all of Ghana. Suddenly, a sharp beam of light sliced through the mansion's windows above, cutting through the basement's gloom. Tires crunched on the gravel courtyard, the sound sharp and deliberate. Kofi doused his candle, plunging himself into darkness, his pulse hammering in his ears. Headlights swept across the walls, illuminating the labyrinth for a fleeting moment. Someone else was here, and they weren't sneaking like him. Their presence felt purposeful, predatory. Kofi crouched behind a crate, the ledger pressed against his racing heart, and strained to hear the faint creak of the mansion's oak door opening above. Whoever it was, they knew this place, and they weren't supposed to find him here. Kofi Mensah's breath caught in his throat as he crouched behind a moldy crate in the basement's labyrinth, the leather-bound ledger pressed against his pounding chest. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the darkness seemed to pulse with his fear. The headlights from outside had sliced through the mansion's cracked windows, their beams dancing across the damp stone walls like searchlights. The crunch of tires on the gravel courtyard stopped abruptly, replaced by the low purr of an engine shutting off. Kofi's ears strained, catching the faint click of a car door. Someone was here, and the deliberate rhythm of their approach told him they weren't lost. He shifted, the cold floor biting into his knees, and peeked through a gap in the crates. A sleek Mercedes gleamed in the moonlight, its polished surface out of place in the mansion's decay. The oak door upstairs creaked open, and sharp, confident footsteps echoed, high heels clicking with purpose on the marble floor. Kofi's heart raced. He knew that sound didn't belong to a thief or a vagrant like him. A woman's voice, low and irritated, cut through the silence. 10 years, and I'm still cleaning up Kwame's mess, she muttered, her tone dripping with disdain. Kofi's blood ran cold. He recognized her instantly, Adwoa Boateng, a cross-media queen, her face plastered on every billboard from OSU to Lab 1. Her glamorous image, all sleek dresses and perfect smiles, hid a ruthless ambition that had crushed competitors and silenced critics. Rumors swirled about her ties to a Cross elite, whispers of deals made in shadowy rooms. What was she doing here? Kofi crept closer, staying low, his sandals silent against the stone. Adwoa's silhouette moved through the grand hall above, her flashlight beam cutting through the dust. She didn't hesitate, navigating the mansion like she owned it. A jangle of keys, then the soft clank of metal, she had a key to this place. Kofi's mind raced. Did she know about the basement? The blackmail files? The ledger burning a hole in his hands? He followed her, slipping down the corridor, his body pressed against the damp walls. The spiral staircase groaned faintly under her steps as she descended, her heels a steady, ominous rhythm. Kofi waited, then followed, his pulse hammering in his ears. In the basement, Adwoa moved with purpose, her flashlight illuminating the labyrinth's twists. She stopped at a blank wall Kofi had overlooked, her fingers tracing a seam invisible in the dim light. A hidden panel clicked open, revealing a steel door. She punched a code into a keypad, and the door hissed, sliding aside. Kofi peered from the shadows, his breath shallow. The room was a technological fortress, banks of monitors, humming recorders, and shelves lined with tapes, each labeled with names and dates. Ministers, CEOs, even a revered pastor, Accra's untouchables, their secrets captured on grainy video. Adwoa's manicured fingers scanned the tapes, pausing on one marked Operation Saffron. She slipped it into her purse, her lips curling into a cold smile. This ends tonight, she whispered to herself. Kofi's foot shifted, brushing a twig buried in the dust. It snapped, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the silence. Adwoa spun, her eyes narrowing to slits, her hand darting to her purse. In a fluid motion, she drew a sleek pistol, its barrel glinting in the flashlight's glow. "Who's there?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous, like a snake poised to strike. Kofi's heart stopped. He bolted, the ledger tucked under his arm, his sandals slapping against the stone as he weaved through the labyrinth. Adwoa's flashlight swept after him, her heels clicking in pursuit, but she stopped short of the staircase. Kofi burst into the night, the humid air hitting him like a wall. He glanced back, Adwoa stood in the doorway, her face half-lit, her eyes locked on him. She'd seen him, his gaunt face etched in her memory. She didn't chase. Instead, she pulled out her phone, her voice calm but lethal as she spoke. "It's me. We have a problem. A man, homeless, maybe 30s. He was in the basement. Find him. Now." Kofi's legs burned as he sprinted through the overgrown courtyard, the ledger heavy in his hands. Adwoa's words echoed in his mind, her allies were powerful, her reach endless. The Order of the Saffron Veil, whatever it was, had eyes everywhere. Kofi was no longer just a scavenger. He was a target, hunted by forces he couldn't comprehend, with a book of secrets that could topple empires. Kofi Mensah melted into the chaos of Accra's Makola market, his ragged figure blending seamlessly with the throng of vendors and buyers. The air buzzed with the clamor of hawkers shouting prices for yams, smoked fish, and vibrant Kent cloth, their voices a cacophony that drowned out his ragged breaths. The humid sun beat down, sweat soaking his threadbare shirt, but the ledger in his tattered bag felt like a smoldering coal against his side. Every glance over his shoulder was a stab of paranoia, Adwoa Boateng's cold eyes haunted him, her phone call echoing in his mind. She'd seen him, and her allies, whoever they were hunting him. Kofi ducked behind a stall piled high with mangoes, the sweet scent mixing with the dust kicked up by passing feet. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. In a narrow alley, shielded by stacks of plastic buckets, Kofi crouched and opened the ledger. Its pages were a maze of coded entries, numbers, initials, and cryptic symbols tied to the Order of the Saffron Veil. His fingers trembled as he traced the lines, piecing together a scandal that made his stomach churn. The Order wasn't just a club, it was a cabal of Ghana's elite, ministers, CEOs, even traditional chiefs, rigging elections, smuggling gold from illegal mines, and laundering millions through offshore accounts. Kwame Asare's name appeared repeatedly, not as a member but as a threat. Entries detailed his attempts to expose the Order, followed by chilling notes, silenced. 2015, Kofi's breath hitched. Kwame hadn't vanished, he'd been forced into hiding, his life torn apart to protect their secrets. Kofi's only hope was Alma, a fiery journalist he'd met months ago while begging outside her office in OSU. Her editorials in the Ghanaian Beacon were fearless, calling out corruption despite threats to her life. He found her at a roadside chop bar, her braids tucked under a headscarf as she sipped sabolo. "Kofi, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her eyes narrowing as he slid the ledger across the table. He recounted the mansion, the basement, and Adwoa's intrusion, his voice low to avoid prying ears. Alma's face hardened as she skimmed the ledger. "This is dynamite," she whispered. "The Order of the Saffron Veil, they're untouchable. Adwoa's their queen, and they own the police, the courts, everything." She leaned closer, her voice urgent. "We can't trust anyone, Kofi. Not yet." Alma's contact, a hacker named Ya, met them in a dimly lit cybercafe, the hum of old computers filling the air. Ya's fingers flew across a battered laptop, his glasses reflecting lines of code. "The ledger's codes point to a gala tonight at the Movenpick Hotel," he said, his voice hushed. "It's a front, Order members will be there, sealing deals." Kofi's pulse quickened. The Movenpick was a crow's pinnacle of luxury, a playground for the elite. Alma devised a plan: Kofi would infiltrate the gala as a waiter, using a borrowed uniform from a friend at the hotel. "Stay invisible," she warned. "Adwoa will be there, and she's got eyes everywhere." That night, Kofi stood in the Movenpick's glittering ballroom, his starched waiter's uniform stiff against his skin. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables draped in white linen, where Ghana's elite laughed over champagne and jollof rice. Kofi balanced a tray of drinks, his head low, but his eyes scanned the crowd. There she was, Adwoa Boateng, radiant in a gold gown, her smile a mask as she charmed a group of men in tailored suits. Among them was a face Kofi recognized from the basement photos, Ghana's vice president, his laugh booming but his eyes guarded. Kofi overheard their whispers. "Operation Saffron is secure," Adwoa said, her voice smooth as silk. "The ledger's a myth." The vice president nodded, but his fingers tightened around his glass. Kofi's hands shook as he served drinks, the tray rattling faintly. He slipped into the shadows near a velvet curtain, watching Adwoa and the vice president move to a private alcove. Their conversation turned to coded phrases, dates, shipments, and the name, Kwame Asare. Kofi's heart pounded. They thought Kwame was dead, but the ledger proved he'd been a threat. As he edged closer, Alma, posing as a guest in a borrowed dress, caught his eye. She pulled him behind a pillar, her whisper urgent. "Kofi, I got a tip from y'all. Kwame Asare's alive. He's hiding in Kumasi, and he's got more evidence." Kofi's mind reeled. The billionaire wasn't just a ghost in the ledger, he was out there, fighting the same war. But as Kofi glanced back at Adwoa, her eyes met his across the room, narrowing with recognition. The game had just gotten deadlier. Kofi Mensah gripped the armrest of the rickety trotro, the minibus rattling along the dusty road to Kumasi. The ledger, hidden in Alma's worn satchel, felt like a live grenade between them. The humid air pressed against Kofi's skin, mixing with the scent of diesel and roasted plantain from roadside stalls. Alma's eyes darted to every passing car, her journalist's instincts on edge. "We're close," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the Trotro's creaking frame. Ya's tip had led them here, to a rundown safe house in Kumasi's outskirts, where Kwame Asare, the billionaire Kofi had thought was a ghost, was hiding. The Movenpick Gala had confirmed the stakes. Adwoa Boateng and her Order of the Saffron Veil were tightening their net, and Kofi was running out of time. The safe house was a crumbling shack in a maze of shanties, its tin roof sagging under years of rain. Kofi knocked softly, the sound swallowed by the hum of Kumasi's evening bustle, motorbikes roaring, children shouting, and high-life music drifting from a nearby bar. The door creaked open, revealing Kwame Asare, a shadow of the man from old newsreels. Once a towering figure with a booming laugh, he was now frail, his eyes sunken and paranoid, darting to the shadows. "Who sent you?" he rasped, his hand clutching a rusty machete. Alma stepped forward, her voice steady. "We have your ledger. We know about the order." Kwame's shoulders slumped, and he waved them inside, locking the door behind them. The safe house was sparse, a sagging cot, a flickering lantern, and a table littered with papers. Over weak tea poured into chipped mugs, Kwame's voice trembled as he spilled the truth. "I faked my death 10 years ago," he said, his eyes distant. "The order killed my wife, Adwoa, when I tried to expose them. They control everything, gold mines, elections, even the courts. The mansion was my trap, packed with evidence to bring them down." He gestured to the ledger, his hands shaking. "That book is my life's work, but they're too powerful. They've been hunting me ever since." Kofi's mind reeled. The billionaire, once untouchable, was now a broken man, his defiance reduced to whispers in a shack. Alma spread the ledger on the table, its pages glowing under the lantern's dim light. "We can leak this online," she said, her voice fierce. "X is our best shot, unfiltered, global reach." Kwame nodded, but his eyes flicked to the window, where shadows seemed to shift. "They're close," he muttered. "Adwoa's always one step ahead." Kofi's stomach nodded. The order's reach was a noose tightening around them. Ya had promised to set up a secure upload from a cybercafe, but they needed time. As they planned, Kwame sketched a map of the order's key players, names matching the ledger's codes, from the vice president to a prominent chief. "If this goes public," Kwame said, "Ghana will burn, but it's the only way." A sudden crash shattered the silence, glass splintering as the safe house door buckled. Black-clad mercenaries stormed in, their boots thundering on the wooden floor, guns gleaming in the lantern light. "Down!" Kwame shouted, shoving Kofi and Alma toward a back exit. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through the thin walls. Kwame grabbed a chair, hurling it at the nearest mercenary, his frail body moving with desperate strength. "Go!" he roared, blood blooming on his shirt as a bullet struck his chest. Kofi's heart lurched, but Alma yanked him through the narrow exit, the ledger clutched in her hands. They stumbled into an alley, the night alive with shouts and gunfire. Kwame's screams faded behind them, his sacrifice buying them seconds. They sprinted through Kumasi's maze of shanties, dodging laundry lines and startled goats, until they reached Ya's cybercafe, its neon sign flickering. Inside, Ya's fingers danced over a keyboard, his face pale but focused. "Upload's ready," he said, plugging in a flash drive. Kofi and Alma watched as the ledger's scans hit X, each page a dagger to the order's heart. The post spread like wildfire, #Saffron Scandal trending as Ghanaians shared screenshots, their outrage flooding the platform. Protests erupted in Accra by dawn, with students and traders chanting outside Parliament. The vice president resigned hours later, his face ashen on live TV. But the truth was darker, a twist that shook Kofi to his core. Among Kwame's papers, Alma found a letter revealing Adwoa Boateng was his sister. Driven by greed, she betrayed him, rising to lead the order after orchestrating his downfall. Her betrayal had fueled the murder of Adwoa, Kwame's wife, and now his death. Kofi's hands clenched, rage mixing with grief. As Ghana's elite crumbled under the scandal, Kofi slipped into the shadows of Kumasi, his name whispered as a hero's. He vowed to protect the powerless, to carry Kwame's fight forward. But Adwoa, still free, watched from a private jet, her eyes cold as she whispered to an aide, "Find Kofi Mensah. He's not done paying."